סביבון, סוף סוף סוף, חנוכה הוא חג טוב, חנוכה הוא חג טוב, סביבון, סוף סוף סוף, סוף נסוף כה וכה, נס גדול היה פה, נס גדול היה פה, סוף נסוף כה וכה.
Shalom. Thank you for inviting me to light the candles for this, the final and 8th day of the festival of Chanukiot. My name is Frank Hellner. I'm the Emeritus Rabbi of the Finchley Progressive Synagogue, which is Me'aver the High Road on the other side of Ballard's Lane from Finchley Reform. I brought with me from home several Chanukiot, which we have, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd just like to say a few words about each before telling the story from the point of view of one of them. Firstly, we have here a Chanukiah which was crafted by Frank Meisler, who was an artist and a craftsman in Jerusalem, and he does very beautiful work. And a lot of his Chanukiot are, in fact, have movable items on it. This one isn't. This one's stationary, but as you can see, quite beautiful. Then there is another from Morocco, North Africa. And this, of course, is not a candle menorah, but an oil menorah. And the oil and wicks are put in here, and it's freestanding, and it's 19th century Morocco. This one also is from Morocco, also oil, but it doesn't stand by itself. It has to be hung on a wall. And then we have this, what we sort of call a traditional menorah, or Chanukiah, and this one evokes lots of memories for me. And I'd like to actually take you back to when I was a young boy, 1947. I was 12 years old. And at that time, there was no state of Israel. There was the talk of there was hope and dreams and a lot of hype about the prospect of a Jewish state being reconstituted in Palestine, which we called Eretz Yisrael, or Judean Samaria, which was the ancestral home of the Jewish people thousands of years ago. And I was caught up in that hype. And as a starry-eyed, idealistic youth, I wanted to be a part of the upbuilding of that country. But I also knew, even then, as a 12-year-old, that if it came into existence, even with the blessing of the United Nations, it would not happen peacefully. It would have to fight for its existence. It would have to be born in pain, like in fact every childbirth, like the liberation of any country. It would have to be born out of pain. Like our tradition says, even the final redemption would have to come preceded by Chevlei Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Messiah. And so, being idealistic and looking for a cause in those days, I joined a Zionist youth movement to help participate in the building of that state which hadn't existed but was yet to be. And I was recruited by the youth movement to help pack, together with other prepubescent, pre-bar mitzvah boys, we were recruited to pack clothing and food and armaments to be shipped to this state or state in the making in Palestine, under the supervision of members of the Haganah, which was the Israel Defense Group, soldiers in the Israel Defense, and to go to the upstairs of a department store in Philadelphia, where I was living at the time, the upstairs floor of a department store, and there to pack this food and clothing to be sent to Israel. In every home, virtually, that I knew of, there was this ubiquitous blue and white box in which we would put our nickels and dimes, that's the currency in America, into this blue box, and it would be sent to the Holy Land for the poor, for the needy, the widow, the orphan, in Eretz Yisrael, in Palestine. And above this blue and white box, there was also this ubiquitous map of Palestine, which is the only name we knew in English for that country. Also, we did a lot of collections, and in fact, in one I encountered for the first time anti-Semitism. I was outside a cinema collecting money for the United Palestine Appeal, the UPA, and a passerby walked by and said, "Why don't you go back to Palestine, Jew?" Now, that had resonated with me many years later, and I realized the irony of that when these same people were saying, "Why don't you get out of Palestine, Jews?" And that stuck with me. I had this dream that somehow I was part of the upbuilding of this country, and if it ever came into existence, I wanted to go there. And that dream came true about 10 years later, when I was sent by the youth movement to Israel for a year on the Machon L'Madrichei Chutz La'aretz, the Institute for Youth Leaders from Abroad. And one Friday, one of the first Friday, when I arrived in Jerusalem, I had actually taken a train from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and as we came into the train terminal in Jerusalem, I heard on the loudspeaker, "Bruchim habayim l'Yerushalayim, Shabbat Shalom." Welcome to Jerusalem, have a good Shabbos. I cannot begin to describe the emotion that I felt at that time, and I must confess that tears welled up in my eyes, and unashamedly I wept. To imagine that I was hearing in a public place, in a terminal, a train terminal, Hebrew spoken for the first time in 2 millennium as an everyday language. Bruchim Habayim, welcoming us to Jerusalem, and Shabbat Shalom. It was an emotional moment for me. And a few months later came December and Kislev, the Jewish holiday, the Jewish month of Kislev, when we celebrate Chanukiot. And I went and bought this Chanukiot in Jerusalem. And this was another miracle. Hanukkah was something I had never experienced like this before. Of course, being in the West, and this time I was in Philadelphia, And just like in London, Christmas is the big holiday that's celebrated in the Western world, and everywhere there is the tree and all the Christmas decorations. And for Hanukkah, of course, in Jewish homes, we had this small celebration. But there in Israel, that was the festival, the winter festival. In the West, there's Christmas, of course, and then there's also the Diwali, which are winter festivals, celebrations. But in Israel, Hanukkah was the big festival, and everywhere there was the ubiquitous Chanukiot. It could look like this, it could look like these that I showed you. They were in the shop windows, in the banks, in the restaurants, and virtually in every home. There was the Chanukiot. This, for me, was a miracle which was greater than the legendary miracle of the oil. And it just made me so excited that here was a living religion in a Jewish state, and it was all ours, all our own. We'd like to light the candles now for the 8th and the final day of this festival of light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שעשה ניסים לאבותינו בימים ההם בזמן הזה. הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים, הנרות הללו אנחנו מדליקים על הניסים ועל הנפלאות ועל התשועות ועל המלחמות שעשית לאבותינו, שעשית לאבותינו בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בימים ההם, בזמן הזה. מהו צור ישועתי לך נאה לשבח, תיכון בית תפילתי ושם תודה נזבח, ליד דחין מטבח מצורם נבח. אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח, אז אגמור בשיר מזמור חנוכת המזבח. Chanukah Sameach, a happy and healthy festival and a good year. Shalom.
סביבות סוף 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 חנוכה הוא חג טוב, חנוכה הוא חג טוב, סביבות סוף 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 נסוף כה וכה, נס גדול היה פה, נס גדול היה פה, סוף נסוף כה וכה.